Yeah, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to introduce to you my presentation today, and thank you very much for inviting me for this presentation. Lian Wang, for your conference. I hope you will have a good one, and this will be my contribution to your conference. Hello, colleagues. Hello, students. Today I would like to present something about Joseph Beuys' advanced understanding of art and consequences his advanced understanding of art has for an artistic art education. So, Joseph Beuys. I think to many of you, Joseph Beuys will be well known, but I will introduce some words on his person before I start. He died in 1986. It was a time when I was studying art, and that was in Düsseldorf, Wuppertal, Cologne, an area where Beuys was teaching, and he was very present at that time for us art students. And in fact, in the post-war art period, in the second part of the 20th century, Joseph Beuys was one of the most outstanding artists, and we can say that now, half a century after he died, that he is really one of the most influential artists on art, how we will see art today. And together with Andy Warhol, it is said that Beuys and Warhol are some of the outstanding artists of the late 20th century. You can see here Joseph Beuys in the background, the portrait Andy Warhol has made of him. Joseph Beuys is well known for his extension of the understanding of art, and there are two essays of him that are rather well known. One say one can always hear is that he said, everyone is an artist. And a term he was creating was the term social sculpture. And we will talk about those things in the presentation that will follow. Very important for us as art educators is that Joseph Beuys understood his art as a kind of art education. And he once said, I require a pedagogical conception, epistemological conception, and action itself. That means the educational aspect was rather crucial for his work. And he was also a philosopher on art. That is this epistemological conception. He thought about the thought processes art creates when we do it, when we produce it, but even when we see it, when we behold it. And so one can expect that for us as art educators, we can receive crucial impulses for an advanced art education when we study Beuys' work. That is what I did in my dissertation in the late 1990 years. And from that, in Germany, we derived the art education concept we call artistic education, in German, künstlerische Bildung. And I will talk about these things to you. First of all, I will introduce to you crucial aspects of Joseph Beuys' art as art education. And second, I will show examples of students' work in school, in educational classroom processes I did with students in the recent years. So, this is what is to say the starting point from where we go on with our thoughts about Joseph Beuys' impulses on art education. His artworks are lessons for creative perception and thinking. So he understood his artworks not only as kind of aesthetic works to show in museums, but always they contained the impulse to be art educational lessons on thinking and acting according to art. What he intended with that was not only to give us some ideas about art, how it functions, how we can create it, but furthermore, and that is a kind of extension of the art, he wanted to overcome the materialism of thought. He thought that that is important and that is elementary for a capitalistic world which follows materialistic aims in economy, consumption, private life, thinking, and even the values we follow. He says that is a kind of reduction of human intelligence, of human mind, that is of danger for the survival of mankind. And he said that in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Now we are in 2023. And with the consequences, climate change, for instance, we see that the consequences of a materialistic thought in our societies and policies causes these catastrophical effects he predicted at that time already. By the way, he was co-founder of the German Green Party. So you see that the engagement of art in society was crucial for him. And social sculpture, this term he created, says every one of us is part of the society, but a creative part. And we are co-producers of the social sculpture. Everyone is an artist does not mean everybody can paint, be an actor, a writer, a musician, but means every human person is creative, no matter on which field, no matter of which kind. And he was convinced that one of the fields where the human intelligence, the human thought, can be educated in the most elementary and outstanding way is the art. And that is why he made his art works as art lessons. And that is why he was always present also in theory of art, in discussions and so on. And the aim is to educate through art, through an artistic art education, the art of living of every person participating in forming the social sculpture. So, educating the abilities of the individual on the one side, but that for the contribution to a democratic, creative society. So, let's see how he did it. Here you see 4 drawings I did deriving from drawings Joseph Beuys did in his presentations and discussions on blackboards. You see this first sign, element 3, E3. Element 3 is what was important for Beuys. That is the artistic thinking. He said artistic thinking is not only a cognitive, a rational thinking like the sciences or economics or so, and what is mostly taught in the schools, but artistic thinking is a polarity, a creative exchange and inspiration between rationality and intuition. So element 3 is intuition and rationality combined in a creative thought that is done and exercised in the arts. Second is the artistic communication between receiver and sender. We will see what that means. And here, down to the left, we see Joseph Beuys' diagram of the creative process. The creative process, we all know that when we, for instance, produce an artwork or try to understand an artwork. We have a chaos, a movement, and a form as parts of the creative process. And we know without starting from points of uncertainties, of kind of chaotic moments, we cannot be creative, forming something new. But the most important thing is the movement we do with a heart sign in the middle. That means the creative process that goes from the chaos to achieving a new solution, a new form, should be a one with passion, with love for the things we are doing, with an emotional contribution, with, as Beuys says, a warmth quality of will. And here, down to the right, we see the dimensions of human world, created all the time in the arts. Sign of the cross, very important for Beuys' works. And you see the dimensions of human world between future and past, between mind and matter. And in the center of these relations, we see the artist who is combining those dimensions all the time when he or she is creating an artwork, or we as beholder try to interpret an artwork. So, Joseph Beuys works as art educating lessons. We see here from 1964 in Berlin an action of Joseph Beuys, who was at that time also part of the Fluxus movement. The chief. Beuys is in this felt role, and he lies here on the concrete floor of the gallery between two dead hares. And he is lying in this felt role for 8 hours. The empty room of this gallery is prepared. You see here his famous fat corners, also here in the side. You see copper sticks from the head end, where is his head, and here a copper stick leaning at the wall, heading to the west, from Berlin in the east, heading to the west. And Bob Morris in New York should have done this action as well, with a copper stick to the east, so that there would have been a bridge between Berlin and New York, but Robert Morris did not join this action. So, felt also around the copper sticks, and Beuys inside here, and you see a loudspeaker. Sometimes we heard Beuys with a hair sound from inside the felt roll. So, many things could be said about this action, the chief. And maybe you have the impression that it has some shamanistic idea behind it, because like an initiation ritual, Beuys is here in the darkness for 8 hours, really suffering, bodily suffering in this situation between the two dead hares. Like the two dead hares are wrapped with their felt, this situation of Beuys is with felt wrapped too, but he is alive. And he is, we can imagine, communicating very intimate with the hares at his feet and at his head for 8 hours. And he says, such situations change me radically. It's a kind of personal revolutionary when I do those things. And what he is doing here is exercising an artistic communication where the receiver, he in the felt role, is concentrated and directed towards the sender, which are the two dead hairs. And the process is a reverse process. The initiative starts from the receiver, is concentrating to the sender, and from there he or she receives impulses, inspirations for reflection, for feeling, for imagining inside his felt role. So it is a kind of reflective communication the artist is doing, and Beuys is very intensively showing such an intimate communication towards the other the artist has to exercise in this action, the chief. Then, in 1965, in Düsseldorf, he made this action, how to explain pictures to a dead hair. It was in a gallery where he had an exhibition of his drawings, and he sat there with a dead hair, holding like a baby at the height of his heart, and his head was covered with a combination of honey and gold. And that is a kind of representation of element 3. In another action, Manresa, Beuys always said, I'm searching for element 3. I'm searching for element 3. And that means the artistic thought overcomes the rationality of thinking and combines it with intuition, with empathy, with emotion. And that is what he shows in this gold honey head, that an anorganic and an organic substance, honey from the bees and gold, metal from the earth, are combined at his head. And they build a kind of unity. And they are warmth processes from where we can receive these very precious substances of the nature, the warmth process of the bees that produces the honey, and the warmth process with fire that gives us the chance to extract the gold out of the earth. Combining both elements, gold for rationality, honey for the intuition, is represented in the gold honey head, and the communication, sender-receiver with empathy, is done with the dead hair. And sometimes Beuys is rising from his chair and walks around in the gallery, the empty gallery, and shows the dead hair, explains the dead hair his drawings. But he does it in hair language. And there's a big window, and in front of the window the public looked inside the gallery and looked at this action. So element 3, rationality and intuition, both developed in artistic communication, and chaos movement form, this creative process, is represented in such an action too. Especially the hint that between intuition and rationality, we should not imagine that our different capacities of thought are in a harmony when we are in the creative process. They are always in a kind of critical conflict. That is the key for creativity, chaos movement form, and we know that our rational arguments are sometimes in conflict with our feelings, that our feelings are criticizing the coldness of our rational thinking. And imagination is demanded in order to create such an action at all. And that is always in a struggle to develop new ideas for which we need knowledge, rationality, empathy, feeling for the hair, for the situation, for the atmosphere that is created in such an action, but also imagination that gives us an idea of something that is not yet there, but has to be created for such an action. And even the willpower, imagine in the chief, Beuys was 8 hours in this felt role. Here, for several hours, he was sitting and talking to the hare in this action too. So developing the willpower, the goodwill, is a part that is also in combination and relation to the other abilities of thought in a creative process in an artwork. So then we have in 1967 and 68 the action Eurasia Stab, Eurasia stick, that is done twice, once in Vienna and once in Antwerp. And we see Beuys with the so-called Eurasia stick moving between 4 felt corners, it's wood, angles wrapped in felt, and he is acting in the middle, and it is, as we see, again, this reflective line we already know from the artistic communication. Beuys, this copper stick, he is moving it into the 4 directions, east and west. Eurasia is a combination of Europe and Asia, east and west. Again, a sign of the extension of artistic thought when Beuys says Europe is a tradition from the Enlightenment on, and even the Greek philosophers of rationality and science. And on the other hand, we have from the East very much impulses of an intuitive intelligence in meditation, contemplation, traditions that are much older and are still very powerful. And combining both is the idea also expressed in this Eurasia stick. And holding this, the stick to the east means he is concentrating to the east, receiving the tradition, the mental tradition from there, as well as from the west, also from the south, the ancient, for instance, culture from the Mediterranean, but also from the north. And he, in the middle, the artist, is combining these relations, and he is going deep into the past, reminding us we should remember the traditions of our cultural heritages in the several parts of the world. But the movement starts from the future because we are always interested in our future. And when we have to create the future, everyone is an artist, with our abilities, with our extended thought, artistic creative thought, then the initiative starts from our future interest, but we have to ask the past, what will be our possibilities for the future when we want to create the future? And what we do then is that we concentrate our mind on changing the aspects of the matter. So the sign of the cross, the dimensions of human creativity, of creating a human world as expressed in this action. So we have to come to the end, but I will show you at least a hint how artistic education picks up those impulses of Joseph Beuys' extended concept of art and art education. I think, as we saw, artistic education is a kind of holistic creativity in our thought, and it is not only a combination of intuition and rationality, it's more a combination of an attentive, empathetic perception, of a personal imagination, of a critical reflection, the warmth quality of will, and even we need relevant skills in order to get from our thought to practicing, changing the real things, for instance, in an artwork or in a kind of societal engagement or whatever. That is what we should exercise in artistic education. That is the challenge for us as art educators. What we want then, or what we try to educate is in artistic projects as the artistic form of education, not lessons, but projects with more freedom for creativity for the students, in a culture of question, not a culture of telling the people what to do, not a culture of a kind of directive ideology, but question. What is the need of the material, of the artwork in order to realize its possibilities and so on? That is what we try to educate: artistic thought, culture of questioning, this artistic communication in school. And the aim is to educate a free, responsible subject as part, creative part and responsible part of the society. A short example at the end, only one example of a student's work, a female student's work with the class 8 in school. I made the project for half a year, 2 hours in the week. Kitsch as art. Kitsch, as you know, is a pop art, phenomenon, and it's a kind of human passion, because it gives us the illusion of a world as a whole, a healthy world, and so on. But we know kitsch is full of illusions. And with the students, critical thinking, we criticized elements of kitsch and tried to find out how it works and how it manipulates us. And then the task was to create an own artwork that is picking up an element of the kitsch culture, but by acting like this kitsch culture functions, achieving a point where it drops into a criticism. For instance, here we see Barbie, and the female student created the costume completely for herself. Everything is designed by herself, as Barbie as a vamp, and the eyes of Barbie are the eyes of a crocodile, of a predator. So you can imagine there are kitsch elements in this fashion of Barbie, but also this beautiful girl is just, when we look closer, changed into something else. That happened in many examples of the artistic project. And to come to the end, because our 30 minutes are almost over, we can imagine that in order to create that, the student needs to critically reflect elements of kitsch in order to use it in her own artwork. She has to start her personal imagination in order to find her own way of expression. She has to exercise attentive perception, how her artwork works and how this artwork is talking to us as the beholder. It needs a will in order to achieve the final goal, to create the work till the end, and skills in order to produce it. This is a culture of questioning concentrated on the artwork in the course of the artistic project. But what we develop with such a project is not only those skills concentrated on the subject, but as a whole, a holistic, creative, artistic thought. So, thank you very much for your attention. this is a book where you can read much more about it